The development context of The Legend of Heroes Trails Beyond the Horizon gives off a strong convergence chapter vibe. Falcom seems to be closing old doors while opening a much larger one with this thematic shift towards Zemuria's first venture into space. From what the demo and official material suggest, this is the kind of game that doesn't just want to continue Daybreak 2, it wants to reposition the entire board for what comes next. The first thing that became clear to me while playing the demo is how heavily Falcom is betting on spectacle and event density right off the bat, particularly by using the hook of Marduk's high-tech training as the perfect narrative excuse to showcase systems, set pieces, and flashy encounters. This smells like a very conscious development effort to address the series' classic problem. It sometimes takes a while to get going. So here, they seem to want to ensure you leave the demo with the feeling that, okay, now things are getting big for real. And that leads to the most interesting point of the context: scale. Falcom has always been good at creating the illusion of a huge world with a smaller budget than it appears, but the marketing and the presented structure point to a very deliberate attempt to raise the ceiling of the conflict, literally placing the continent's collective expectation, the space launch, as the dramatic engine. To me, this is the studio saying, this phase of Kalvar isn't just another arc. It is the bridge to the core of Zemuria's secrets, something the promotional text itself claims with much ceremony. The return and crossing of paths of figures like Van, Rian, and Kevin also reveal a very specific behind-the-scenes development focus. Falcom is weaving fan service with structural function, not just cameos. Playing the demo and seeing what they've shown, you can feel they want these meetings to carry lore weight, as if the cast were an emotional shortcut to accelerate the gravity of events. And this usually happens when the studio knows it is getting close to revelations that sustain years of setup. My personal read is, Beyond the Horizon seems like a game made with that now it's happening energy, as if Falcom were using everything it learned in Calvard to prepare a leap in status. And the demo functions as a very direct promise of this, even if it is short enough to leave a teasing aftertaste. If this confidence will pay off in the full game depends on them maintaining focus and not getting lost in their own ambition. But the released material and the slice shown in the demo already convey a rare security from someone who knows exactly what kind of sensation they want to leave the player with before launch.
The story looks like a turning point chapter. It starts with an almost scientific, optimistic space race atmosphere, but quickly descends into Zemuria's existential secrets. This became very clear in what the developer itself has been highlighting: the fate of the continent at stake and the central question, what lies beyond the horizon, as a constant theme. In what has been released so far, the premise is strong because it takes a historical moment of the world, Zemuria preparing its first adventure into space, and uses it as a narrative trigger, not just as a backdrop. The clever move of calling Van, Reen, and Kevin for a Marduk exercise is the type of planned coincidence Trails loves. It looks bureaucratic, operational on the outside, but it smells like conspiracy on the inside. Personally, what pleased me most about this beginning, especially from what the official material describes of the prologue, is the feeling that the game wants to put the characters on a collision course with the rules of the world, and not just a villain of the week. When the synopsis itself speaks of secrets in the heart of the world and diverging paths, you can feel that Beyond the Horizon is aiming for that long-term payoff the series has been guarding for years. I also like the way the story seems to want to play with perspectives, because 3 protagonists pulling the narrative creates a nice tension. What does each one consider a priority when the subject is literally the future of the continent? The promotional material insists on this format of paths that separate but orbit the same final question, and this usually yields good tonal contrasts. Van more grounded, Reen more weight of legacy, Kevin with that walking secret energy. The choice of Marduk as the pivot of this beginning makes me particularly interested because high-tech training in Trails is almost never just training. It is a laboratory, it is control, it is a test of moral limits.
If there is one thing Beyond the Horizon seems to be getting right in tone, it is this mixture of wonder, space, technological advancement with anxiety, prophecies, world core, end approaching, which is very much the face of the Calvard arc when it wants to get ambitious. The gameplay seems like the natural evolution of the Daybreak hybrid, only loaded with more options and looking more like a system for players who like to press everything at the right timing. What became most evident in the demo and the released material is that Falcom doesn't just want to repeat the formula. They want to stack new layers, like ZOC, Awakening, and Shard commands, on top of what was already working. To me, the best feeling is how the game continues to use the field in real time as a pre-combat phase that actually matters, and not just a corridor to the turn-based menu. You engage the enemy, hit them to wear them down and fill resources, and then the transition to turn-based mode becomes a tactical decision: when to switch, why, and with what advantage. When it drops into turn-based combat, the part I enjoyed most is how much positioning and aiming of attacks make a difference, because you aren't just choosing a command, you are adjusting the area, catching more targets, and trying to get the maximum bonus from passive buffs. Furthermore, the turn timeline continues to be a mini-game in itself. Turn order bonuses, delays, stealing windows, and this gives that flavor of aggressive chess that the series has always done well. Now, the big star of Beyond the Horizon, from what was shown, is the package of new mechanics: ZOC, Awakening, and Shard commands. ZOC acts as deceleration and window gaining that changes the cadence of the fight. Awakening becomes that beast mode button to explode damage, and Shard commands resemble an evolution of group orders, only consuming resources and becoming a timing-based power play. Another thing that left me with a good impression is that the battle demo in the Grim Garden was designed exactly as a showcase for builds and synergy, with formations led by Van, Kevin, or Reen, which encourages testing different styles instead of just clearing content. This type of demo is what most reveals the truth of the system. If it's fun to experiment, fail, and build a new kit, then the combat has real depth. The only part I feel might divide opinions is that adding it all up, field, turns, timeline, ZOC, Awakening, commands, and orbments, it sometimes seems like too much at the same time, especially in common encounters. But if the campaign manages to calibrate difficulty and pacing to make these tools matter more at the right moments, bosses, elites, challenges, Beyond the Horizon has everything to be one of the most satisfying combat systems in the series, precisely because it demands more brainpower and more intention from the player. The graphics convey a very clear "this is it" sensation. It is by far one of the best looking and best presented Trails games Falcom has delivered in this modern era. From what the demo shows and what the trailer showcase made evident, the direction is more confident in using camera, effects, and animation to sell impact. And this changes a lot of how the game looks on screen, even when the technical base still carries that Falcom DNA. The first thing that grabbed me in the demo was the general sharpness of the image and how the game looks cleaner, especially the user interface, text, and on-screen readability, something that in previous games could be bothersome depending on the platform and display size. It's not just resolution, it's the feeling that you can finally appreciate the scenery, interface, and composition without that visual noise that sometimes made the presentation look cheaper than it should. In the environments, the impression is that Falcom is extracting more from the engine debuted in Trails into Daybreak, with sceneries that are more pleasant to explore, and photography that helps set the mood without needing an absurd leap in geometry. The result, at least in the demo, is that type of evolution that doesn't scream next gen, but makes you think, okay, now this looks like a modern JRPG, especially when the camera pulls back and the game lets the scale breathe. As for the characters, you can still feel a bit of the Falcom jank, and honestly, I think that's become part of the charm, but the animation has improved where it really matters, in the most important scenes and the big attacks. In practice, the game uses cinematic strikes, arts, and framing to disguise the seams, and this works much better than I expected. In combat, the effects are much more polished and brighter, but without turning into that illegible mess. And this is crucial in a system that is already full of layers. One thing I enjoyed is how some sequences in the demo seem designed to be watched, not just played. You feel Falcom trying to sell the set piece, sell the choreography, sell the moment. In Trails, this is important because the series has always been very strong in world and text. When the visual presentation keeps up, the emotional impact and the sense of event rise with it. My opinion is that Beyond the Horizon succeeds in giving a real facelift to the series' visual identity without losing the Trails look, and that for me is the best possible scenario. If the final game maintains the consistency that appears in this material and this demo, you can expect a more pleasant visual experience from start to finish, even without being the type of JRPG that lives on realism or cutting-edge technology. The performance gives off that modern Falcom vibe. Playable and enjoyable most of the time, but with fluctuations that you feel in your hands when the game gets more open, full of NPCs, vegetation, and effects. This doesn't destroy the experience, but it totally changes the comfort depending on the platform, and primarily if you have VRR on your TV or monitor. In the demo, what struck me most was realizing that the game flows well when you're in turn-based combat, where readability and timing are more predictable, but becomes more irregular in the field and in busy areas, which is exactly where you want that smooth, strolling sensation. This difference in consistency makes it clear that the bottleneck isn't the game won't run. It's the game trying to do too much at the same time. Draw distance, shadows, scenery streaming, and the frame time paying the bill. On PS5, the existence of two modes, quality priority and performance priority, is great, except the frustrating part is that, according to my tests, neither delivers a locked 60 FPS. And in practice, this means the performance mode becomes a 60 with drops, which you notice more in exploration than in fighting, unless you're playing with VRR helping to hide the variations. The curious detail, and kind of a classic Japanese game thing, is that the most stable way to play on console, if performance is the absolute priority, seems to be running the PS4 version on PS5 via backward compatibility. The same test showed this combination as a locked 60 FPS in the evaluated areas, which gives that wonderful sensation of firm control, even if you accept a simpler visual presentation than the native PS5 version. On Switch 2, my feeling based on what was measured and what can be noted in gameplay material is competent but variable port. It doesn't promise a fixed 60 FPS and instead leans on the VRR experience at 120 Hz in handheld mode to smooth out the perception. In handheld, this can be quite pleasant, but docked, the image tends to look softer, and when the rate varies, you feel the game constantly negotiating between fluidity and quality. On PC, the story changes quite a bit, because the port, done by PH3, seems very robust and with truly useful performance options, including high FPS limits, fine-tuning, and even an asset caching system to improve load times using more memory. My conclusion is, if the idea is to play with maximum smoothness possible, mainly exploring and using turbo without feeling stutters, the best bet today seems to be a well-tuned PC or PS4 on PS5 if the priority is locked 60 FPS on console. If the priority is playing on a handheld and you tolerate variations, Switch 2 seems totally viable. It's just not the type of game you buy expecting surgical frame rates in all situations. It pays off more to buy The Legend of Heroes Trails Beyond the Horizon at launch if you are already emotionally invested in the saga, mainly in the Calvard/Daybreak arc, and enjoy entering the hype of discussing story and builds right in the first week. If the idea is to have the best possible experience with fewer bugs and with community guide/consensus already formed, waiting a bit tends to be the safer choice. Based on the demo, the impression is of a game that knows exactly who it exists for. Fans who like the talkative pace, the political construction, and that pleasure of seeing the paths of various characters crossing. And yes, the demo is quite short, which gives me a sensation of have a taste and now suffer. So buying day one is more an act of faith and anxiety than cold cost-benefit analysis. On the other hand, one can also feel a classic Trails risk. This comfort in rhythm and structure can be great for those who love the series, but for those who are less patient, it might sound like dragging things out. And recent reviews already point out that the game sometimes gets too comfortable in its pacing. So, if you are the type who gets irritated when a JRPG keeps the story on a slow simmer and asks for hours of conversation before the big payoff, waiting for a sale, or at least a post-launch evaluation, makes a lot of sense. The game is indicated for JRPG fans who like long narratives, large casts, world continuity, and turn-based combat with plenty of customization and extra buttons to master. It is also indicated for those who already enjoyed Trails through Daybreak and want to see the plot of the continent walking toward a final chapter, as the marketing description itself suggests. The game is not indicated for those who want a simple entry point, because Trails usually carries a lot of context, those who prefer shorter and more direct stories, or those who get tired of games full of systems that only show their true potential in the hardest fights. And if your pleasure in RPGs is more free exploration and less text and party organization, there is a chance you will feel the game is always pulling you back to the rails. In the end, the personal recommendation is to buy at launch if you are already inside the cult and want to live the novelty together with the community, accepting that the demo has already shown that the game loves to tease and hold back important things. Wait if you want to spend your money better and prefer to jump in when it's already clear how the performance, initial patches, and consensus on the campaign rhythm stand.
That looks like a nice chest. Now it's my turn. Now's your turn. I've got this. Great circle of life. Give unto us the breath of mercy.
Let's go, Zeros. Take off. Do it, Theo. Do no knees. Sliver. Reset. Need a hand? Blink in your mission. Store for me. Phoenix Dance. Set back over.
Good day to you.